Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Van Alstyne. Welcome back to The Social Academic. Today, I'm so excited to feature Dr. Monica Cox, a professor, author, and change maker. Monica, thanks so much for coming today to talk about your new book, Never Defeated: 9 Lessons from the Workplace Frontlines. I wanted to be sure to get that right.
It's okay. That's fine. It's very long, so you did a great job. Thank you. So great to be here and to meet you in person, kind of.
Yeah. I know we've been connected on social media for a while, and I've been following your amazing work, but I'm so excited to introduce you to the social academic community. Would you mind telling people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am, of course, Dr. Monica Cox. I am an academic and a professor, an engineering education professor. I'm also a former administrator, and I am an entrepreneur who is the CEO and founder of STEMnet LLC, which offers a variety of offerings that have an umbrella of helping people to emerge whole, bold, and strong in the workplace or whichever environment they so choose. So that's me
Whole,
in a nutshell.
bold, and strong. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Tell me,
thank you.
what prompted you to write Never Defeated? This is such a powerful book. What made you know that it had to be out in the world?
Okay, so there's the business answer, and then there's kind of the other heart related answer. So I
Yeah.
would say, from a business perspective, I have a Stop Playing Diversity brand, which is based on just my commitment to authentic diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the quick part of that story is that when I was hired in my most recent organization, I told them not to hire me if they were playing diversity. And of course, they didn't know what that meant. But over time, I realized that a lot of the things that I needed to be successful in that workplace as a Black woman administrator just they weren't there.
Mm.
And I decided to trademark Stop Playing Diversity. And that meant that I wanted to have guides, coaching, the business arm, and I wanted to write a series of books. So, Never Defeated is one of the books that I'm going to write as part of the Stop Playing Diversity brand and the trademark for the business. So, like I said, that's the
Amazing.
business part. The personal part is that I went through hell at work. It was a mess. And there's a quote in the book where I talk about a blueprint. And I wished I had a blueprint before I started this experience.
Yeah.
But I always said, sometimes you have to be the blueprint. And as I was learning and documenting what was going on, I would look at tweets and kind of just record the tweets. And I wrote essays based on the things that were resonating with people on social media. So that is the heart part of this, where it's my story, where it also is informed from the voices of people who've gone through situations very similar to mine. And as you know about social media, there was also the upheaval with Twitter X. And I thought, if it goes away, what about all of that information, all of those conversations? And
Yeah.
this book is kind of the way for me to almost take ownership, to take back some of the valuable conversations and resources that came out of a really good time for me on social media. That was the long story.
Oh, and a beautiful one that really touched my heart. So I hear what you
Thank
mean
you.
when you say the heart side of your reasons for writing this very important book. Never Defeated is so powerful because it reads as authentic. It reads
Thank
like
you.
you're talking to me. And I think that's what made me pick it up and not put it down until I finished. I mean, I was like walking around the house with it, trying to make sure that I got all of these words in because sometimes when we see things on Twitter, it does make a meaningful difference in our lives, but seeing all of it at once, like being able to read your words, it was quite meaningful for me. I really
Thank you.
appreciated it. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll say something really quickly about it where, like, even this morning, my husband was telling me that someone was reading it and the words were powerful. So I thank you for this. It is still kind of difficult for me to process all of it because I'm also healing
Yeah.
as I share what I've talked about. So it's not easy for me to just be like, let me read this every day. No, that
Mm-mm.
was my life and I lived it and it was just a moment.
Yeah.
And there's just an element about that I want to put about the book too,
Of
where it
course.
felt like I was sharing a piece of myself. And it's just that it's all compact, but that was really my life with
Yeah.
the death of, my parents and so many real things that
Yeah.
have impacted me. So even now I
Mm.
feel a little emotional talking about it because it was that real to me as a person.
Ugh, I hear you. I hear you. And I really appreciate that maybe despite the emotional weight of writing the book and sharing, like you still put it out there in the world and you still write your tweets, even though, I mean, I guess I wonder, is there some fear when you're talking about, things that happen that are maybe not talked about in the room,
Yeah.
but like you're saying it on Twitter. And so I'm wondering, what are your feelings
Right.
about that? Was it different when you were
Yeah.
writing the book?
So when I talk about the tweets, this seems very spiritual and some people may not get this, but I will be asleep and when I wake up I hear like it's almost like the
Mm,
words come to me and so I'm writing them because it's like this is what I'm supposed to say for the day. And sometimes it's punchy, but it is almost like you and I talking right now. I just
yeah.
know that there's like a thought that has formed and so that's what that is. So I don't feel like the fear when I
Yeah.
write things that are so truthful because it is just as clear as a bell to me that that's what I'm supposed to say.
It's like
The
already formed in your mind when you're going to
Yes.
say it. I get that because as a poet,
Yes.
that's how I write poetry. It's not how I write social media posts, but it is
Okay.
how I write poetry. And so I hear you when you say like the feelings that like that happens when you're writing it in your
Mhm.
head and then it's out there and you're like, but it's already there. It exists.
Exactly. And sometimes I have my phone next to me and I'll write something as a note. And so that's something too. Like I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and that's one thing. The part about the book is that I had a book consultant, a developmental kind of like editor. And at
Wonderful.
first, thank you. And at first, I was not going to write stories. The
Hmm.
first draft was very much practical, and that was it. And she
Oh.
pushed me to include more of myself in the book. And I did not think that I was ready to do that because there are some stories people didn't know about. And I knew that I would be very vulnerable sharing, for example, how I contacted the president of my university when there were things happening after the murder of George Floyd and, kind of what happened. Like I'm whistleblowing on myself to
Yeah.
say, this is what I did with other people during this time. And one thing that people have really complimented me on, and I was very careful about, is making sure that I was very truthful with my stories without naming names.
Yes.
So if people do not know where I work, you would not know. And my developmental editor, even by the time she looked at it, she's like, I don't even know where you work.
Mm-mm.
So I realized that that's an immense skill to be able to tell so much. And I do that on social
Yes.
media as well. It's so much like, oh my gosh, without fully telling you what's up.
Yeah.
And that also is something I would say that I have to tread carefully with from a legal perspective
Yeah.
because I was so involved in a legal case for 3 years where I had to decide, am I going to remove myself completely from social media? Am I not going to write? Am I going to shut down my voice? Or am I going to figure out how to still share my truths without incriminating myself, without telling too much? Like it's a slippery slope to do this work. And I
Mm.
will say it's very strategic, very deliberate. And I hope that's what you see, even as I'm like teetering right there and like, what? But nah, I know how to say it.
I'm curious when you say that you approached a point in which you had to make a decision whether to remove yourself from social media or to
Mhm.
stay. What
Yeah.
helped you make that decision?
Well, it's the motivation for me actually being on social media. Once I was an administrator, I said it in my book that it was kind of like an archive for me, but I got to a point in my organization where it became very dangerous for me to be there because
Mm.
of the lack of the equity work that they were doing. But also, I could tell that I was being set up to kind of be this scapegoat, and I wasn't going to be that person. I was going to fight. So I had an attorney who I worked with at the time, and two of the things that he mentioned about social media usage is that it's archived, and I mean, it's an archived record, of course, of what happens. And he said, you have to tell the truth. Like in a court of law, it would be like the timestamps and is what you're saying true. So I used it very strategically. And I always said, because it literally got to a point where I was being harassed because of some stuff. I said, if anything, God forbid, ever happened to me, then my husband, maybe my legal team, the people around me could look at what I wrote on social media and have that as evidence of what I was going through. Um, so I was hiding
Mm.
in plain sight.
Yeah.
And people didn't understand what it was like. Why does she do this every day?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want people to know what happened on, Monday, February 17th. Oh, it's too much. People would say, oh, it's too much. Why would a department chair do that? Because I was concerned.
Yeah. You're protecting yourself. That's
Absolutely.
interesting
Yeah.
that people tend to have that fear when it comes to social media, but you actually found some protection in it in the sense that it was a documented record. I'm
Absolutely.
wondering, for listeners who may be experiencing something similar on their university campuses, what
Mhm.
kind of documentation do you recommend that they practice?
Um, well, I would say social media can be good, but you don't even have to use your real name. Um,
Mm.
so some type of pseudonym or something, but it's still like this happened, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, of course, if it ever came to the point where people needed to know that was you could say it was you and, it was something like that. But that's one way that you can use it. Another way, I mean, it's just email. You
Yeah.
just, when I was a department chair, I used to think about this all the time. There are some like basics. When you have a meeting with someone, you want to make sure that things are clear. So you
Mhm.
can send an email afterward. One of the things that people need to be careful of is having conversations on the phone because that's not
Ah,
really documentation. You
right.
need it to be written. You need the summary to be written. And one thing that I even learned through my organization is that I would send things and people would not respond. But when it was time for me to compile information, I could have, 5 examples of like when I did contact people, like, hey, I told you I was in distress on this date. I told you that I was having this issue with an employee. And I think that's going to be one of the big things that we do strategically moving forward to protect ourselves, particularly in an anti DEI age. Um, People are going to avoid, they're going to
Right.
want to walk that fine line. But if we are in distress, we need to put that out there in writing that this is unacceptable. I am being treated this way, and this is how I move forward. And I think one
Mm.
other quick thing I'll say, the reason this is very vital is because I've also learned through my experience that the policies are not in place to protect certain issues like microaggressions. There is no law against someone microaggressing you. There is no law in place against workplace bullying. So when you're experiencing situations that make you feel that your life is in danger, or in the case of, I don't know if you saw Dr. Bonnie, Dr. Antoinette Bonnie, I think Dr. Candia Bailey. where she ended her life. We need to tell our stories in ways that sometimes are cries for help, but are sometimes those records after we have left an organization to say,
Mm.
this is what happened on this day. This is my voice. These are the people who knew, etc.
Mm.
I'm sorry, I went off. That was long, but
No, but
I know
thank
too
you for
much about
sharing
all
that.
this.
I think that I have wanted to ask this kind of question before. Sometimes I've had guests on my show that have experienced some bullying on social media and other things. I know I had Dr.
Mhm.
Carlotta Berry who came and talked about it, but you've been through the kind of legal battle and something that's public, and you've written about it in ways that I feel like people will really hear what you're saying, and they'll take it in, and they'll start practicing some of those things themselves. Like, I want to help inspire change with this
Right.
conversation. And so I really appreciate you being open and authentic about that.
Oh, thank you. Of course.
No, when I think about your time on social media, like, it's been so impactful for your thinking and your thought leadership and what you share with people. But how has it changed over time? Like, you've been on social media for a while, right?
I have. I think Twitter was documented, I think I started in 2010. So how has it changed? I think people are actually talking, which is funny to me. Academics were not talking back in the day.
Mm.
I think there's still some fields where people just kind of post their accolades, but now people are having more conversations. I also
Right.
think when it comes to marginalized communities, people are bolder about talking about the issues that are going on in their personal lives. So they're showing
Yeah.
more of themselves. They're also talking about problems that they experience. I see a lot more political statements.
Yes.
Even religious statements, displeasure with things. And I wonder if it's like the younger generation that's coming in, but I feel they just have less fear when it comes to displaying themselves and just talking about, like I said, I'm Southern, and I come from this more subdued, maybe cultural environment. But I mean, there are people who are dropping their pics in tight dresses. They're kissing up on folks. They're just like grown and sexy. And I think
Yeah.
we need to see people who are just beautiful in every form, um, who are thoughtful and funny. And so that's what I see. I see people who are human more and not afraid to be human. And that's good.
Mm. What about
Yeah.
for yourself? Do you feel like you've leaned more into that over time, or have you always shown up and been authentic?
You know what? I think that all of this connects back to our disciplines because I said I'm
Yeah.
an academic. And so, as an academic in a STEM discipline, it's got its own culture. Engineering has its own culture. I'm in engineering education, so that's got its own culture. So, it's like nested cultures. And I would say my culture is very, very, very conservative in how they move. I haven't talked about a lot. And this was like the running joke of me on social media, where everybody would say, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Monica said this. Like, is she off? And one of my friends even said in my community, she said she didn't want to look at my social media because she's like, she's going to
Mm.
get fired for saying
She
the
was scared
stuff that
for
she
you.
says. That's what she said. And that also speaks to that culture. So, how
Mm.
have I changed? I have gotten out of the fear of my community and I have connected so much broader. Like my platform, I think across all of my social media, and I probably have repetitive followers as well, but it's about 75,000 people.
Wow.
And, I started with a handful.
Yeah.
And the noise of my community is so quiet. It's so quiet now in terms of
Mm.
what they think because I see the impact of my
Yes.
work. I see the feedback that I get, like people who are leaving careers because of a book, because of a tweet, people who are sharing their stories because of things that I've said. And I'll even give this as like a testimonial. And I knew that I know there's something to it. And then I started a newsletter on LinkedIn in December. And I only have maybe like 13 editions because it's bi-weekly. And I am up to, I want to say like 8,500 subscribers right now.
Whoa, back since December.
Since December. And I had maybe 700 in the first day. So there is something that is happening that is bigger than what I am. And so that's it. It's the boldness. It's I don't care what my academic community says about me, because I know that what's happening is more impactful and bigger than what is in their box.
Ooh, tell me a little bit about the Accomplice Academy. I want to make sure that people who are listening can join if they're a good fit for it.
Absolutely. So it is a really intimate group right now of people who want to be equity accomplices. And what I mean by that is people who we focus on 3 areas. One is I talk about like the level of risk. You know, as an accomplice, you're going to understand that what you're doing is high risk. And so I engage through a subscription service, a monthly subscription service, where we talk about what it's like to take those risks and how people can do this and protect themselves in the process. The second area that's kind of connected back to being an accomplice is like looking at the level of change. And so I really focus on systemic change. So if you are in an organization, how are we making sure that we are offering sustainable solutions for people to remain safe and for equity to be real? And the third part is really having people focus on others instead of themselves. Many times when you see people who are allies, you know, some of them will wear like a banner and be like, I'm an ally, come to me. But I often tell people, you're not an ally if I don't say that you're an ally. And it's this space where sometimes as an accomplice, we do the work and people don't even know that we do the work, but that's what it means to do it. And I brought up the example in the book, for example, about going to the president of the university, of my university, and saying, this is what's happening in our organization. Please look at these statements from our engineering students, look at the statements from our engineering faculty and staff, and take that into consideration when you hire the next leader of this organization. So, like I said, even though I shared what I did at the time, it wasn't that people knew it. And as I told you, my developmental editor was like, you need to share stories. And I was like, okay, I'm finally going to tell people that I was an equity accomplice in my institution at a very dangerous level, at a pretty high level. And I knew that the consequences could have been a lot worse if the leader was not committed to racial equity. That was a lot. So those are some examples. So that's what the Accomplice Academy is. It's like doing the work and having the support to talk about it in a safe space. And I would say a couple of my most active people, one is an LGBTQ plus advocate who is a burnout coach, and another is a professor in a state where they have anti-DEI laws now. And we really talk about this. What does this look like on your roles as a coach or as a faculty? So thank you for mentioning that.
That is amazing. It sounds like a group where real change can happen, not just change within ourselves, but change in our communities. That sounds so cool. Oh, I'm curious. Since we were just talking about being a good accomplice and how being an ally is really about making sure that the other people feel that we're good allies, not ourselves. What's one way that we could be better accomplices or allies on social media?
Man, there are a lot of ways, I think. One is like amplifying statements that I think are very courageous. So if there is someone who is saying something that the world needs to hear. And if they could be, criticized for it, or if
Yeah.
they're in a vulnerable position, by saying that, I think that the very public way that we show support sends messages to organizations that we are aligned with that person. Another is actually putting real content out, being brave, being courageous, and saying, this is what systemic change looks like, or here are some examples. So tips, I think social media is a wonderful place to educate. And if we have handbooks, if we have resources that have helped us, if we have contacts, other books, this is the prime place for audiences to see how to do the work really well. So sharing is another piece. But I think being authentic, like once you're there, and I feel like this gets to like the risk part, but once you are on there, it's about being that consistent voice so people know that you are trustworthy, that they can rely on you, that you are that person who is for the cause. And so consistency, and I feel like that's an internal thing. For someone to be courageous, there's a difference between the theory of it. And that's what I mean. Like, my inner circle of accomplices is so small right now because anyone can post just a good statement, but it's the translation of that statement into action under pressure that shows me if you are really an accomplice, because it comes with sometimes negative impacts on your livelihood.
Yeah.
And that can include a job. Maybe you lose an opportunity because you're too dogmatic, or because, you said something that is really pushing the envelope. But from a business perspective, I often tell people, anyone who reads what you present and they're turned off wasn't someone you probably needed to connect to in the first place, because you're going to have a lot more issues down the road. And that's what I say even about doing equity work. If someone's like, can you tone it down? Can you do whatever? Guess what? I'm not the consultant for you. Go to the one who's going to help you to clear things and make sure everything is measured in your organization, because that's what you're looking for. You're not really ready for the accomplice level of work that I'm proposing.
Oh, that's really helpful. And I think it also helps people know whether they should join the Accomplice Academy. Like, are you really ready to do the work and to take action in your organization? Oh, that's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. Okay. Well, I want to show the book again. Be sure to pick up your copy of Never Defeated by Dr. Monica Cox. Monica, it's been amazing chatting with you today. Is there anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I'm also an author. So for people who I'm an author. You saw that with the book, but
your romance book, right?
Fiction. Yes, I have one that's dropping this week.
I'm gonna get it.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, I love romance books. I do.
Thank you, because you know what? That's a taboo. So we could talk about that. We talk about authenticity. People are like, what are you doing? Are you out there writing smut? What's happening? And I'm like,
I'm in.
Thank you. My people love each other. Okay. They love on each other. They love each other. So I will say that. And the thing that I will also mention is that I put social justice things in my book as well.
Yeah.
So even in the one that's coming up, and I'll say this really quickly, my protagonist did not earn tenure, but she was involved in a domestic abuse situation. And we have an issue where she goes to Alabama, and because of their laws, she can't be an unwed mother. And, to keep her job with the STEM students because of donors. And so that sounds very familiar. And so the arranged marriage part of my romance is when, spoiler alert, her principal boss doesn't want to lose this amazing teacher. And so, they kind of like each other anyway.
Oh, that sounds great.
It's this whole social justice thing that's embedded in romance and how they have to move forward. So I'm just putting that teaser out there to say it's not just smut, although you get it, but it's the lessons behind how women of color have to move professionally, and personally to be successful and to be whole, bold, and strong. Same
Oh,
theme.
I so appreciate that. As a survivor of domestic violence myself, I found love. I found romance. Like, I can't wait to read this book. It's on my reading list. I'm very excited. Okay, pick up your copy of Never Defeated by Dr. Monica Cox and connect with her on social media. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Social Academic.